Hello, and welcome to Roll for Resilience, a podcast with a mission to explore how we can use role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy as tools to facilitate personal healing and growth. I am your host, Effector of Change, and I use he, they pronouns. I am a lifelong gamer and a licensed clinical social worker. On this episode of the podcast, I will be interviewing Dr. Jamie Marich, who has a new memoir coming out titled You Lied to Me About God. We are here. We are live. Welcome to the stream, y'all. This is Dr. Jamie Marich. If y'all don't know, Jamie is a wonderful, amazing EMDR therapy colleague of mine, and she's written a lot of cool stuff. She's written a lot of cool stuff in the field, and I have the honor of getting a special copy of her newest book, which is titled You Lied to Me About God, and it is a memoir, which is a little bit of a different style than Jamie typically writes. It's been a treat. It's been a treat to get through it and hear about your experiences and the way you've organized it. So we're just going to spend the hour just kind of chit-chatting together about the book, about what you're doing. So this is part of Jamie's book tour.
Yes, it is.
The one thing I didn't have prepared ahead of time, do you have a specific link if anybody's interested in purchasing said book?
Well, truly it is available wherever books are sold. The book is distributed with Penguin Random House, so you can actually buy it through Target or Walmart if that's your jam. A lot of the independent booksellers have it. I just dropped for you in our chat. You can share it with the streamers, Anthony, redefinetherapy.com or my name, jamiemarich.com is a good website to go to. You can click on the book image there and there's all kind of options of where you can purchase it. So wherever it's easier for you to buy books. And we also have an audiobook that is coming out with it. And that was really another layer of the healing to be able to narrate the audiobook of my memoir. And so if you are an audiobook person, I would say get the audiobook because we're just really happy with how it turned out.
And so you actually narrated the audiobook? That's awesome.
I did, yes. So a few books ago, my books got to the level where I was given audiobooks in my contract. And I had some voice talent do the first few audiobooks, largely because I was out of time. But then when Dissociation Made Simple came out, I said, this is too personal. I need to be able to read this myself. And it was just such a beautiful experience doing that. So for the memoir, I got the audiobook right to read my own.
Excellent, excellent. So if you also know, this little podcast is called Roll for Resilience, where we are chit-chatting about the intersection of mental health and role-playing games like Final Fantasy, D&D, things like that. And we kind of have lots of conversations. I run an actual play channel where we play D&D 5th edition, but we also like to participate in special events. This week, folks might know, is Mental Illness Awareness Week, and there is a raid train that we've been participating in. We're going to have a slot tomorrow as part of that, where we're going to kind of check this interview again and invite some more people in to have some conversations about spiritual abuse and how does that impact our mental health, which is fantastic. And to my knowledge, Jamie, you've never been on Twitch, is that right?
I have never been on Twitch. I love that it's out there. I have some friends who are on it. I think I am kind of at my maximum potential for platforms, but who knows? Maybe you'll convince me to join Twitch too. Maybe.
It's a good time over here. Here. The communities that get built are they're very unique. And I've seen some people do a lot of gaming on their streams, but for instance, like the train that's going on right now, people are talking about their experiences with depression, ADHD, autism, just like being out there and showing up for each other. It's really fantastic.
I think that's quite beautiful because, social media and media in general can certainly come with its downfalls. But when I hear like what you just shared about how communities can gather and share knowledge that has often been kept in very elite places, I know this is worth it to be able to connect this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess one question I have for you, Jamie, is like, as As you were getting ready to write the book, one thing I noticed right in the acknowledgments, right, is you've got a whole bunch of folks that you listed on your journey who have been there, who have been with you. This is not your first wheelhouse in publishing, right? You've been doing this for a little while. So at what point did you really think that it would be a good idea to just switch out of the clinical headspace and just write your experience in this memoir?
Such a good question. A lot of my clinical books do have what I call a memoir-ish quality, where I share from lived experience. And sometimes I've had to fight publishers on that. Occasionally, publishers will say, you talk about your own experience too much. You have to be more clinical. North Atlantic Books, the publisher I'm with now, even though they're not specifically a memoir publisher, they have allowed me to be more personal, which is why I like working with them. And I knew probably for the last 10 years, I have had a book in me about spiritual abuse and religious trauma. But when I talked it out with my long-term editor, I told her, Shana, I can't do this unless it's a memoir. It just felt dishonest to do it unless it was a memoir, because the spiritual trauma I experienced really was the core trauma of my life. And I'm a fan of memoir. I've read a lot of memoir. I also kind of had some fear around writing a memoir because both of my parents are still alive. My brother is still very much alive, and he's an active Catholic priest. And so I had to do some work around, would I be okay with pissing people off if I truly wrote a memoir? And I remember even talking to a good friend of mine who's also an attorney on my team. And we're like, well, here are the options. You either wait till everybody who's in the book is dead, or you take a breath and just do it and just put your voice out. And being able to put my voice out like this is the byproduct of 20 years of therapy and getting to this place of, I have to be okay speaking this no matter what the consequences are. So that's how this evolution happened. And I am truly glad my teaching, if you will, on spiritual abuse is out in the world in this way.
So I haven't read all your books. I'll be honest, Jamie.
Fine.
But I have read quite a bit of Dissociation Made Simple and obviously this book. And one of the things I really liked about your style, especially in Dissociation Made Simple, for example, is it's like, okay, so you're Dr. Jamie, right? Like you've got some creds, you've got, some letters, and you've done a lot of training, and you've got some certifications. Like you're kind of a bigwig in the world of EMDR therapy and creative expression. However, when I read that book, I was just like, oh, you are not putting yourself above anybody. You are just as much open and honest about your experience as everybody else. And so I think you had 61 contributors or something that helped you create Dissociation Made Simple. And to me, as a trauma therapist specifically who treats dissociation and complex trauma, to just see the diversity of experiences and opinions on all these major topics in the field was a breath of fresh air for me.
Thank you for appreciating that, because there are certainly a lot of people who don't in the ivory towers, or people who really do benefit from the us versus them polarity in mental health. And I mean, I feel part of what makes me effective at my work, whether that be clinical work or teaching, is that I have lived this. It's not theoretical to me. And the whole reason I even got into this line of work is because my first recovery sponsor suggested that I would be good at it. It's nothing that I don't know. It's been very hard to separate the two. I mean, I have had to learn to separate the two, obviously, when professional ethical boundaries are at play. And I believe I do that well when I'm one-on-one with a person. But as I have gotten more privilege in my position, I mean, thank you for saying I'm kind of a big deal. But I think what that means is those of us who are in those positions of power and privilege do need to start coming out and keeping it real. And that's a lot of what I decided to do in Dissociation Made Simple.
Yeah. When I was in my graduate program, so I have my master's in social work.
Great.
I go to my very first counseling 101 class, if you will, and we're learning about things. We had to videotape ourselves, and I learned
Mm-hmm.
that I do this a lot when I talk, and I still do this a lot when I talk, and it's
Great.
fine. But one of the things that I found really challenging is here I'm being told by a gay white man how we need to
Mm-hmm.
be a blank slate in the room, right? Like we need to
Mm-hmm.
not talk about politics. We need to not bring up
Mm-hmm.
religion. You know, we've got to
Mm-hmm.
because we're gonna push people out if we do that. And I was like, this is so I finished. I was in grad school. I finished in 2015. And so, like, my whole life or my whole clinical career has been nothing but political, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the events that are happening in the world around white Christian nationalism are our
Correct.
mental health. And so I really appreciated that information that you put into You Lied to Me About God, is just kind of outlining just your own personal experiences with those themes, because it is something that's relevant even today. And a lot of clinicians, I think, are really challenged with how do I navigate self disclosure? What do I share? What don't I share? And to me, I feel like that's a really amazing piece to just explore the raw feelings that you were going through during some of these trivial times we've been going through.
Yeah. Thank you for seeing that. And yeah, so many big feelings. It's,
Tell us all your feels.
oh, let me see what is coming out the most with that. I mean, I was certainly raised. I'm going to keep it very real with you because I know I can on this channel and this platform.
If you want to be a
I was
DJ, Jamie, go for it. This is Twitch.
This is Twitch. Great. I love it here already. So I was raised as a clinician with a lot of those same ideas, like blank slate. There's certain things you don't talk about, especially politics, maybe religion. And what was interesting is even as I got into my first mainstream counseling job, kind of at a group practice at a group agency, all of the therapists there who had clients that had anything connected to spirituality or religion that they wanted to talk about, they sent them to me because, oh, you're the one who's willing to go there with them about
Do
this.
you know
But
how
I kind
many
of had
drag
this,
queens I was referred?
yeah,
I'm like, you realize they talk to each other, right?
yeah, right, right. And so it was like anybody who had too much trauma, anybody who had too much dissociation, anybody who had too much spirituality. And I just kind of shook my head that if we as clinicians are giving lip service to this holistic idea, we have to be anyway. So there's that. But even as I came up through the early decade of my first decade as a therapist and as a trainer, I did keep it as blank slate or as neutral as I could, at least in my public life, because I live in Ohio. It up until 2016 was a swing state. You would have people in both directions who were therapists, who were clients, whatnot. And because I grew up conservative and still had a lot of people in my life in conservative religion, I really did try to appreciate that folks. And I didn't get as political as I could have in the early days of my career. And I think that's true of a lot of queer folks who want to be safe, who want to stay safe in the profession, who want to stay safe publicly, who don't want to make too many waves. I certainly made waves in the EMDR world, but politically, I kept it pretty neutral. And then Donald Trump got elected. And I knew I no longer could dial it in the way I needed to because when 2016 happened, when the election happened, it was also happening at the time my marriage was absolutely nosediving. And it was my second marriage. It was a marriage I had no business being in. I do reference some of it in the memoir. It was also about a year and a half after my most public coming out that I did as bisexual. Because even coming out happened in stages. And then in 2016, I decided to, not 2015, to come out fully, which meant I had to come out to my family finally. That was fun. I say that very sarcastically. And then when he got elected, I just, I was immediately kind of convicted with some guilt that like I didn't fight hard enough for my people and those who don't have a voice, because as a person of privilege, I would be relatively fine no matter who got elected. But then I started to feel like maybe I won't be so fine, especially if I'm more open, with my queerness. So As the director of a training institute in EMDR therapy, I started making some very bold choices about even addressing in my EMDR training that you can't hide behind that anymore. Of, politics, that it doesn't really matter because I'm here to be your therapist no matter what. Clients may need to know who you voted for to feel safe with you. Clients may need to know where you stand on things to feel safe enough with you, because after the 2016 election, I had a complete meltdown. Part of it was because of the marriage, but a lot of it was because I suddenly had this 24/7 reminder of everything that was wrong with my upbringing in front of me, and seeing so many people in my family just rise to support this person who I see as a monster. And so in getting back into therapy, I had to look for an EMDR therapist again who knew dissociation, who knew a lot of things. But ultimately, I couldn't pull punches. I had to know right up front where she stood politically, who she voted for. And she told me just in very plain terms, I grew up evangelical. I get what this means for people who've experienced narcissistic abuse to have, Donald Trump as president. And I've just been phenomenally grateful that I can work with a therapist where I don't have to hide any of that. And yeah, so in my trainings, I discuss that I'm not saying that automatically people of one political party can't work with another, because I've seen it happen in my, training groups. But my point is, we can't shut down clients when they ask, when they really do need to know who they're sitting with, because matters are very important for a lot of us.
So for the viewers at home, I had a really interesting experience at the EMDRIA conference. I think it was, was it last year? I can't remember. Last year, the year before, the one that was down in Washington, D.C. And they had this really...
That was last year.
Was it last year? They had this really cool conference app. And so there was like all of these like forums and meetups, so people could connect with each other. And we had like a little special like queer EMDR therapist luncheon meeting. And so that was just nice to be in space. I know Jamie was there. I was there to connect with other people who are just, we're our little bubble. But then, that's exactly what I'm going to reference. Then we find there's a Christian EMDR therapist subgroup getting together, and they're like starting to like, I don't know, vaguely talk about conversion stuff in their group. And so JV is just like poking at them, asking some questions, getting in there.
So let me go there. And I just dropped in our chat, and you could share it on the Twitch side if you want, an article that I just wrote where I referenced this very thing you're talking about. And my new article is called Define Christian. Nice. Because I have learned in the last few years, whenever people congregate and say, we're Christian EMDR therapists, using the example that you're bringing up, my immediate question is, how are you defining Christian? And where I feel some energy around this is, even after everything I've went through with spiritual trauma on both the Catholic side and the evangelical side, I take no issue with Jesus Christ. I take no issue with, my theology around him may be different, but I still have no problem, dare I say, calling myself a Christian. But in modern America, to lead with I'm a Christian, or to say that I identify as a Christian, it has a lot of hate-filled charge to it and connotation to it, because of what, certain forms of Christianity, especially the kinds that are aligned with Trumpism, have become. So yeah, I've basically, there's this meme going around like, are you a Jimmy Carter Christian? Are you a Donald Trump Christian? Yeah. And so in this group chat that you were referencing of quote unquote Christian EMDR therapists, that's what I led with. Like, how are you defining Christian? Because I just know that for a lot of people, that label in modern America to say I'm a Christian means I'm not okay with LGBTQ people being who they are. And the reality is there are a lot of LGBTQ plus Christians who are coming out of the closet about that, saying, and some have never been in a closet about that, let's kind of take back Christianity here, and let's challenge this notion that, yeah, because there's some ugly stuff that happens with people who call themselves Christian therapists, Christian EMDR therapists. I also wrote a blog about that not too long ago. Like, dear Christian therapists, here are some things we would like you to know, especially those of us who have been hurt by Christianity. So thank you for reminding me of that episode. It was a fun part of our career.
A fun part of our career. Absolutely. Good times.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, Jamie, I don't identify as Christian. I was not raised in a family that really pushed those views. I was baptized. That was about it in terms of like the interaction there. But I'm thankfully from a town. So I'm from upstate New York, which similar to some of the vibes I imagine in Ohio, where you've got some of these pockets of liberalism surrounded by a bunch of red. That's my area too. So there was an openly queer LGBT service member that had passed away in the region years ago. And so Fred Phelps and his little God Hates Fags group decided to come to town to try to protest, as they used to do all the time in the Westboro Baptist Church. And the Christians of my region gathered together and drowned them out and chased those fools out of town. And so,
oh, wonderful.
To me, I think that just having had that experience, we're observing it, was very healing for me as a young queer person when I heard about that, to learn that, like, okay, it's not all Christians. Yeah. That's good.
Most definitely. There's a couple of great resources I want to point people to if you're not aware of them. There's an organization called takebackchristianity.org, which is organized by a group of progressive pastors who theologically could take down a lot of these people, like the Westboro Baptist Church and other maybe more mainstream evangelicals and Catholics that still promote a lot of hate-filled messages. I also go to a festival. I can't get there every year, but it's a really cool experience in North Carolina called Wild Goose Festival. And it really is a gathering of all things progressive Christianity. And I just think for a lot of us who have grown up with especially Christian spiritual abuse, it can be reparative to see people who identify as Christian, who are very much walking a very Christian path, say this is not okay, how queer folks have been treated, how other marginalized folks have been treated. So, yeah.
Thank you for the resources.
Sure.
So, Jamie, I have one major contention with your book.
Go on.
One big concern that I think you need to stop them from printing it and fix this error very soon. So I love how you put little footnotes throughout the book to just add some context to different concepts. Yeah. But I only saw like one time in the book you had a nice little Jesus footnote.
Okay.
So instead of like the asterisk, because there was two, I think, in the same section, they added a little cross to give like a little factoid. And I'm like, it was kind of like a VH1 pop-up video moment, right? Like, here's a little thing if you didn't know about, Christianity. Yeah. And I'm like, you should have done that consistently through the text. That would have been golden.
I may have to take that up with the copy editor because, I remember that's making me laugh because she brought that up as like, well, in MLA formatting or Chicago style formatting, when you're doing footnotes in this way, the cross would come as a third. So yeah, that could have been fun. But,
no, I thought that was hilarious. I'm like, was that intentional when I saw it early on? But yeah, it was just hilarious.
Yeah, it's interesting to me what people notice because I know a very good Jewish friend of mine read the book, and he's somebody who still identifies culturally Jewish, but he's not particularly religious. And his thing with me was, why did you capitalize God throughout? Because he said, for me, God, I still, and I believe in it's lowercase. And I think I did end up mentioning it somewhere in the preface. Like, if it's better for you to refer to God as lowercase, do it. But he and I ended up getting into a fascinating discussion about even punctuation and capitalization around God. And I wrote a poem later after I had drafted the book, basically saying, God doesn't care if you capitalize their name. So if it works for you to capitalize it, great. If not, and I think, I also go on my rant about how for me today, God is gender fluid.
Mm-hmm. So. I definitely retweet. I agree.
Cool. Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. So I know I think we've had some correspondence about it before, but I do recall in the book that theme about people claiming to be safe and
Mm,
how much that makes my nervous system activate when that happens. And so that is something we talk a lot about on Twitch because some people make it their brand to have a channel that is a queer safe space, a BIPOC
mhm.
safe space. And I think some people are using that language for good reasons, right? They want to do that. But I know for me that sets off my culty alarm vibes when I see that kind of languaging. So what would you say just on that notion when people are trying to curate like what kind of community they want to make on a content creation space, or if they're trying to build a platform and they want to be inclusive, what
Yeah.
advice would you give them?
Yeah. So a little bit of, I will get to my advice. One of the reasons that I bristle when I see like the safe language, I think the intention is good. I really want to emphasize that for folks who are using that, like this is a safe space for XYZ. The problem in that fundamentally, though, is you are telling me what to feel. I don't like when therapists do it, when pastors do it, when yoga teachers do it, the whole you're in a safe space. I don't know that yet
Mhm.
until I come and sort it out for myself. And so I know some people have asked me, what do you think about the whole brave space thing? I'm like, that still kind of makes me cringe because again, you're telling me what to feel or what to expect. I mean, I think there's a couple things you can do. Uh, I would love to see a creator tagline something like "Come and decide for yourself if you feel safe here." I think open space could be nice, more general, it's a little more neutral, but fundamentally, safety is something we model as creators, as leaders in spaces, as therapists, and people will decide for themselves if I feel safe or safe enough there. So, I mean, I think we can, like, for example, my company, Institute for Creative Mindfulness, I deliberately made a choice to have a rainbow logo. So, some people may read into that and be like, ew, I don't want anything to do with them because they're obviously, a bunch of queers. Cool. We probably wouldn't want you here anyway, or wouldn't feel
Mhm.
safe with you here. So, but then again, just waving the rainbow flag doesn't necessarily make you safe if you're not backing it up with action. So I don't know if I have a real easy answer other than safety is something you model, safety is something you vibe. I think you can have on your site something like a positionality statement that indicates what you stand for, and that might help people feel okay enough to at least come and give it a try. And I even like that sentiment of like, come and hang out and decide for yourself. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I agree in total. So like on Twitch, like one of the things that you can do is called a channel point redeem. So as you're hanging out in a stream or if you're participating, you earn these
Mm-hmm.
points and then you can click the button and then things can happen and every stream's
Mm-hmm.
different what they do. And so two of the buttons I have, one is trans rights or human rights. And so if someone
Mm-hmm.
spends the channel points, a little graphic will pop up. It's probably disabled for this stream if anyone's trying to do that, but a little graphic pops up. I have another one
Mm-hmm.
that says it's Black Lives Matter. I have one that's
Mm-hmm.
called a pronoun party. And so like everyone can kind of talk about their pronouns if they'd like to in chat. And so to me, it's a show versus tell situation, right?
Yeah,
I'm
I
going to
like
do
that.
what I can to show where I'm coming from, where my exclusiveness is, but I can't necessarily say, hey, like, you should feel welcome here, or because you can't tell someone how they need to feel. It just doesn't work that way.
So it's interesting about this is just reminding me, and I think I tell this story in Dissociation Made Simple, not the memoir, that I noticed as I was kind of coming up in the profession and making myself, a little more known with my teaching and whatnot, I would feel an immediate sense of this person is cool if they were a professional who wore a nose ring.
That's a
And
good vibe
when I,
check.
right? Yeah. And so around 2014, I'd always wanted to get, I just have a little nose stud in. I had always wanted to get my nose pierced. And I remember going to the parlor with my friend and was getting a tattoo. And I'm like, maybe I should just get my nose pierced today. And, I heard that little voice from my mother in my head saying, but what are people going to think professionally? And the voice came up in me that said, if people aren't going to listen to you because you have a nose ring, they're probably not going to be the type of folks, to listen to you. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying you have to have a nose ring or tattoos to be cool, because I also find people who share their tattoos publicly, or at least people, I feel okay enough about approaching initially, at least in the profession. I like how you use that phrase, Anthony, vibe check, because ultimately you know who you vibe with. And growing up in the kind of religions I did, I was very much told not to trust that was the devil talking. That was, the body, the flesh talking. And I've had to learn to trust that what I consider to be my inner voice, which I think is, in my belief system, ultimately a gift from God. But it is worth trusting. I am worth trusting. And if you are in a place, friends, where there's a big label out that says this is a safe place and you don't feel safe, trust that.
Yeah, I always think the body knows sometimes what the brain don't know yet.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was interesting as a parallel, though, as I was reading through your memoir, you talk about your journey into the world of yoga. And
yes.
it's funny to me because, like, I've had a lot of clients that talk about, like, what works, what doesn't in terms of, like, grounding or, getting their body moving, mindfulness stuff. And for some people, that doesn't work for them, to just sit and meditate and listen to a thing. And, you brilliantly described that in Dissociation Made Simple. Why? Because it's an invitation to continue to dissociate for some people, right?
Can be, yeah.
Makes sense why that's not always the thing. But one of the things I've always told folks, especially if they're new into psychotherapy or EMDR therapy, of like, why yoga doesn't work, or sometimes yoga does work, it's like, well, it depends on who's teaching, right? It really depends on what that practice is. If you have a practitioner, I think, that is giving you an invitation and is asking for permission and is very gentle, you're going to vibe with that, perhaps. If you have someone who's telling you how to move your body, who physically gets involved in that process, that's not going to go well for folks who have a history with trauma.
Yes. Let's go there, though, because I very much agree with that, especially now. But there are some trauma survivors, especially religious trauma survivors, because they don't trust themselves, believe that teacher is telling me exactly what to do. They're going to be my ticket to salvation. Because even when I got what you're referencing in the book, when I got involved with the ashram, there was a lot of me that was like, this isn't right. But the other kind of parts of me were like, but maybe you're missing something. Maybe you don't have the spiritual knowledge to kind of fly on your own. And I think a lot of us feel like because we don't trust ourselves, we're missing something. So I can tell you this from training therapy. A lot of therapists don't like training with me because I don't tell you exactly what to do. I give you a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight, a lot of lived experience, a lot of here are some things you can try, even in following a protocol. And students ask me questions. I answer a lot with it depends. And that drives a lot of people crazy because I'm not telling them exactly what to do. And honestly, being a clinical trainer all these years that I have, I now understand why people join cults. That's a lot for me to put out there, right? But I think it fundamentally comes from this thing we have. Sometimes it's trauma that does it. Sometimes it's the you're not enoughness that society promotes. But a lot of it comes from the churches. A lot of it comes from the religious institutions, the spiritual institutions, that you have to put your trust in someone else or something else in order to be an okay human. So if you are, I say all that to say, if you're that kind of person who has kind of gotten into a yoga school but they know better, so I'm going to go along with it. But your inner voice, your gut is telling you no, trust that.
Yeah, the joke I always tell people who were new to that is like, so yoga's cool. A lot of people really like it and people seem to find it engaging. But I think that sometimes yoga can be a little culty. So we've
Oh,
just got to
for
be
sure.
discerning on how we're entering that space. And as soon as I like make that reference, most people are like, yeah, that makes sense.
You got it.
Yeah, it's to me it's also interesting this parallel of showing versus telling in terms of like a vibe
Hmm.
check or a sense of
Yep.
safety. I think you said in the book something along the lines of like you don't get to call yourself insert yoga title. I don't remember what it was, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You get called that by other people who have been
Hmm.
able to work with you
Oh,
and identify, yes,
yep.
I want to work with this person because
Hmm.
they give to me what I need, or the way that
Hmm.
they teach speaks to me. I don't know exactly how that
Hmm.
works, but to
Yeah,
me, I
yeah.
think
I'm
that you hit
knowing
that
what
theme
you're
right on the head.
Yeah, you don't get to call yourself a guru, is what it is. And that's authentic yoga teaching, that it's the people who proclaim you to be a guru. And I often feel that true gurus would never call themselves a guru
Of
because,
this
yeah,
I was going to say, I have sometimes the same feelings about folks who say, I'm a mental health advocate.
yes, yes. I am a thought leader. I am a mental health expert. So here's my favorite definition I ever heard for the word expert. This is from Niels Bohr, that an expert is anybody who has made every mistake they possibly can in their field and has like lived to tell about it. I'm seriously paraphrasing him, but and I think fundamentally experts are people with lived experience. Experts are people who have learned from their mistakes and can share from them. So glad we're having this discussion.
This has been good. This has been good. So another theme that I've kind of noticed throughout the raid train that's been happening this week that people talk about is a lot of people obviously are talking about their experiences with diagnosis and their symptoms, but some people are sharing their stories about what their experience has been like interacting with people like you, people like me. They interact with therapists and it doesn't feel good or it doesn't get them
Mm-hmm.
the results they're looking for. And what would you say, Jamie, are some suggestions that you would give to
Yeah.
folks in terms of like vibe checking a professional, somebody who we might seek out for psychotherapy or
Yeah.
psychiatry or anything related to that?
It is a great question. Before I answer it, I want to acknowledge that this answer is from a pretty privileged place because I have access to a variety of mental health providers, a variety of holistic providers who I'd have to pay cash for. And a lot of people who may be on the platform and on social media just don't have that access, or their benefit or their insurance may be really limited in what it covers. That being said, you have every right to interview the people you're seeking out for services. You can schedule an initial appointment with a therapist, and that doesn't mean that person has to be your therapist. You have every right to kind of check them out. Now, literature suggests 3 sessions. But if you're feeling unsafe, like after one, you don't have to go back. But if after 3 sessions it feels like you got a good thing going on, that's a pretty good predictor of outcome. The kind of crude metaphor I make is it can kind of feel like dating. I mean, don't date
I
your
use the
therapist, of
same one. I
course.
use the same one.
But yeah, feel it out. And if it's like, yeah, this just isn't working, trust that. I've also been phenomenally privileged, lucky that I've had good fits with the people who have been the main healers in my life. My first sponsor, who kind of came to me, I didn't really go looking for her. And then the two main therapists I've worked with, they were recommended by people I trust. So maybe that was part of why it felt like a good fit. I do think websites in the modern era, you can build vibe off a website and help people present themselves. My friend is sitting here in the room with me, and I remember when she first went on Psychology Today with her profile picture, she's like, "Do you think this looks too unprofessional if I leave like my glasses up on my head?" And I'm like, "No, I think it sends a message that like I'm accessible. I'm not trying too hard with an overdone headshot." So yeah, you can fill out spaces, I think, virtually and see how you connect. I think another point that really needs to be said is, obviously, I'm a professional therapist. I believe in psychotherapy when it's done well, but I also believe in what an early interviewee in an early book of mine said, which is that bad therapy can be worse than no therapy. And there's also a thing that modern psychotherapy does not have the market cornered on healing. So if you're getting your healing because you're getting community on a platform like this, I don't put it down. For some people, it is working more with a shaman or a spiritual teacher. You know, therapists can often get really opinionated about life coaching, but I know some good coaches that are out there who are doing well in their scope and in the paradigms that they have. I know there's a whole movement like in the plural community, in the DID community, especially because we've been so mistreated by a lot of clinical professionals, that peer mentorship may be the way to go. And I adore the peer movement in addiction recovery. And I say that with the full recognition that, you know, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And I don't think every therapist has to be, but I do hope that people are able to trust their judgment and find and end up with the fits that do work for them.
I think that this idea of vibe checking, that I guess is our theme. Yeah.
That's a great theme. It is a great theme.
I think you have to vibe check your therapist. You have to take some time to suss them out, get to know them a little bit. And if it's not a right fit, I would totally endorse that concept that bad therapy is worse than no therapy. It's alarming.
Yep.
As an EMDR therapist who does typically work with more complex presentations, I've done a lot of cleanup for EMDR therapy that has not gone well for some folks before. And so I totally endorse that perspective. Absolutely. The way that you wrote your book, Jamie, to me was really interesting, because when I've read memoir before, oftentimes it's kind of a narrative timeline, right? Where you're kind of going from beginning to end, and you're kind of getting a little bit of vibe of this story. But I imagine your brain is just a little more creative than the average memoir writer, because that's not how you organize this book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the themes? Why you organize it that way?
Yes. So I'm a big theme person. Like we just said, vibe checking is our theme. And I am thematic organization, thematic history taking. Even when I teach EMDR therapy, I am adamant that getting a chronology may not be safe and it may not be possible because of the way trauma gets disorganized in the brain. We may not be able to keep a clear timeline. And so part of why I chose to organize the memoir thematically was, even in a more healed state, I don't think linearly. I don't think in linear terms. And it just made sense as I was organizing the memoir to organize it along themes. So like what Anthony is referencing is chapter 1 is like the wounds of warfare, kind of giving the basic definition of what spiritual abuse, religious trauma means. Chapter 2 is about family roots. Chapter 3 is about moral development. Chapter 4 is about sex in the body. That was one of my favorite chapters to write. I have a chapter about queerness, chapter about the role of like the feminine God. And I know people who want linear may not like a book that's organized that way, but it's my memoir.
Yeah, it's your book.
This is how my brain operates. And one thing I tell readers at the beginning is, if you do go through and read the whole book, maybe notice which chapter most gets your attention, which theme most gets your attention. Yeah, and maybe it's because, I have a plural mind. It's just easier for me to think that way. But even the memoir I've read, I love it when it's more about theme and not pure chronology, not pure narrative. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, each little subsection in the chapters, to me, it almost felt like I was like on your website scrolling through your blog and just getting little nuggets of, just thoughts or things that you like to share, put out into the world. And like, I'd get to the end of a section and I'm like, I feel like this rise in my chest, like, oh, she's going to get to something good. She's going to say, bam, there it was just before the section ended. I'm like, that's so good. So I really, really enjoyed that piece. It kept me wanting to continue to move forward as I was getting to those little rises and falls throughout the narrative there. It was excellent.
And I think especially as somebody who works with complex trauma, that the brain is not this linear place.
No.
And so if you did want a real kind of raw look into my mind and my experience, there would be nothing about it that's linear. So you got your thematic organization.
So the book is coming out very soon. I think next week.
October 15th, next Tuesday. Yes.
5 days away, 5 days away. So I just want to
Yes.
plug, if y'all are interested, do check out redefinetherapy.com. Make sure you pop over there. Like Jamie said, you can pick up the book at Walmart, at Amazon, at Target, wherever you're getting any of your major books from. And I think the price point, that's something that I know, Jamie, you've done really persistently throughout your writing career, is to not make it a textbook, to make it accessible in terms of the books that you write. And you did it again with this one.
Yes. I have a commitment that any book that I write or publish, I don't want it to be over $20. Unfortunately, I did 2 books with a more academic publisher and it pains me to sell the books for that much money. It really does, because and I don't think it's undervaluing what I do. Like, it's a privilege to be able to make in some way doing books, but I want knowledge to be accessible. And if people can't afford the book, on redefinetherapy.com, I repost all my interviews that I do, any articles that I do. So I do like to put a lot out there that people can get at no cost too.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this about my stream, but I have a timer that goes off periodically of different resources. I also have a card that lists like different databases or ways to find a therapist. And one of the number one links that I always leave at the top of my coping skills, I have to update it now because I know you've rebranded.
Yes.
TraumaMadeSimple.com. Yeah. It is an amazing resource.
Yep. TraumaMadeSimple.com still directs to Redefine Therapy. So if you're still using the TraumaMadeSimple.com, I still own the domain. But yeah, Redefine Therapy is just kind of, I just had too many websites. I wanted to condense them a little bit. And I mean, I think a lot of what my brand has been about is Redefine Therapy. And, fun story about that. It was an earlier book I did, Dancing Mindfulness, that came out in 2015. And it was the only book I did with a more spiritual publishing house that's now defunct, or they were absorbed by another publisher. And I had a wonderful editor I only had the chance to work with once. And I was kind of writing this ending chapter saying that it's not so much what's happening in therapy offices that is exciting me. It's what's happening in therapy, like in communities, like what you're doing here on Twitch, what happens on social media, what can happen in, like in this case, the Dancing Mindfulness program that I had kind of created and the spaces that, we showed up in. And the editor comes back to me and she's made a title suggestion for the closing chapter as Redefining Therapy. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, I can't put that out there. And then it's like, why not? Why not call it Redefining Therapy? And then Holly, a friend of mine who was doing social media at the time, she started using a hashtag Redefine Therapy. And I've rolled with it.
No, it's a fantastic hashtag. I've heard your interviews, I think, on the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, and I know those folks over there have definitely plugged Redefined Therapy. They've totally embraced that model. Absolutely.
Very fun story. In Montana, where I'm at sitting for this interview doing an EMDR training, Kurt from the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, he's actually one of my assistants for this training.
That's so funny.
Yeah, he's trained to be faculty with my group ICM, and he's assisting me for this training. And yeah, I plug that podcast all the time, Modern Therapist Survival Guide. It's just some good real talk about a lot of issues in therapy.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes on there is when I learned about Maslow and his cultural appropriation. I was like,
right?
Oh my God, a pyramid makes no sense. No wonder it was a TP the whole damn time.
Exactly. Yeah, Kurt and Katie they go there.
They do. No, they're doing good work out there. Now that the book's coming out and it's kind of, maybe you're getting towards the close of your book tour, what's next in the era of redefining therapy for you?
What we're finding out next, because we really don't know. Yeah, this is actually kind of the start of the book tour. Okay, you're one of the first main events we're doing. So we got 2 weeks where We're doing book event dates pretty hard and they continue into November. I really don't know. And it's a great question because I'm still exploring how much I want to be a part of professional psychotherapy because I've long, especially as a bisexual person, I've long lived with this foot in both worlds. Like I've the joke is often we feel too queer for straight people, too straight for some queer people, right? And I think like with the therapy professions, I'm too rebel for a therapist. And I still value a lot of what it means to be a therapist. So, but I don't know because there's so much about the field that frustrates me. And writing memoir, I think, has gotten me to consider maybe there are other forms of writing out there for me, like fiction or continuing to write more in a non-clinical way where I can still have an impact teaching.
Yeah, you're a wonderful writer. You are able to take all this gate-kept information that the institution holds and just, here it is, guys. Did you know about this?
Thank you for that. That means a lot to us that you noticed that.
Absolutely. You take what has been difficult. So I have a copy on my bookshelf back there of The Haunted Self, which is the textbook about like
dissociation.
Yeah, and I'm just like, what? What is this? What are they saying? I don't. It's not accessible. It is not helpful for me as a clinician. I could never give a client to read that, right? And then I pull out Dissociate Made Simple. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's well worded. I can't say I 100% endorse every single word that you would put in your book from my own clinical perspective.
Yeah.
But again, that's part of why I really liked how you did, like, this is a group project. This is a collective putting together this experience. Let's start here and let's go. And the social justice end of your writing makes me smile. It just does to see what you do there.
And to that point, I think as a field, we need to continue to support work by queer writers and thinkers, by Black African-American people in other countries. Like I want to shout out a really good friend of mine, Akila Riley Richardson, who's from Trinidad and Tobago, who's just starting to make a name as a therapy teacher. And her non-US perspective is something I think a lot of us in the US can learn from. So yeah, keep supporting people who look like the clients we serve and the diversity that our field is.
100%. Jamie, thank you for joining us on this little podcast of mine. I appreciate you. And I know the folks have been excited to be here.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you for kind of being one of these first big book launch tour online appearances we're doing. And we'll proudly share the podcast around.
Really do appreciate your time. And we're just going to keep talking more people. Go redefinetherapy.com, please.
Thank you, Anthony. Have a good rest of your night. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you all for joining yet another episode of Roll for Resilience. Again, I'm Effector of Change, and you can find me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/effectorofchange. If you'd like to support my work, feel free to donate me a coffee at ko-fi.com/effectorofchange.